Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's flow will be a 20-minute beginner sequence and it will focus on some foundational work. I've had a few requests for some shorter content, so that's what we'll be jumping into today. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. So today's practice will begin in a child's pose. Come to seated on the shins, and option to bring knees wide or close together if wide is too much on the low back, and walk the arms out long in front of you and settle upper body towards mat. Finding a grounding minute before we start our practice. If your forehead doesn't reach the mat, you also have the option to bring hands under the forehead and rest into the hands to bring the floor a bit closer to you. Wherever you are, take a deep inhale through the nose, and open mouth, exhale, let it go. One more deep inhale through the nose. Open mouth, exhale, let it go. If you're ready to move with me, press into hands and slowly walk the hands towards body, eventually coming up to a neutral spine, allowing the head to come up last, and bringing knees in together. We'll find a tabletop position. Walk hands out under shoulders, knees stack under hips, and find a solid table. We'll move into some cat-cows. On an inhale, heart melts towards floor, head and tailbone extend towards sky. Exhale, round through the back, head drops, tailbone drops, cat. Inhale, cow, heart melts towards floor, head and tailbone extend towards the ceiling. Exhale, round through the back, cat pose, head drops, tailbone drops. And on your next inhale, find a neutral spine. We'll move through some wrist warm-ups, so taking some wrist circles here. Come to circle in a clockwise direction. It's important to warm up the wrists properly before yoga because it's a common place that we get injured, switch directions. We bear a lot of weight on our wrists in this practice, so warming them up is critical to having healthy wrists. And eventually coming back to your neutral spine. So let's move through some sun salutations. We'll come into our first downward dog of practice. So maybe walk hands out a little bit and press into toes, hips drive towards sky. Downward facing dog. In the first one, I like to pedal out the feet a little bit, bend into the left knee, and then bend into the right knee. Any movement that feels good in the body. And eventually coming to a comfortable stationary position. So you want to drive the heels towards the floor, and if they don't touch, that's completely okay. It's more important to keep a bend in the knees than to touch the floor with your heels. So when you're ready, come up onto toes, bend into knees, and let's all walk towards the top of the mat, starting our first sun salutation. When both feet have arrived at the front of the mat, you'll find yourself in a forward fold. And take a minute here to allow the head to hang heavy, maybe interlacing and grabbing opposite elbows with opposite hands. And just feeling a bit of a weightless sensation in the upper body. Eventually drop hands back towards mat. Bring hands to shins, halfway lift and lengthen. Bring your spine up to parallel with the floor. And on your next exhale, drop upper body towards legs, forward fold. Inhale, ground into feet, and gently roll up the spine, one vertebrae at a time. Mountain pose. And eventually sweep arms up to meet overhead. Exhale, hinge at the hips. Dive upper body over lower body, forward fold. Inhale, hands meet shins, halfway lift and lengthen. Exhale, plant hands, feet find the back of the mat, plank pose. Now we'll move into a chaturanga. Option to lower the knees and gently bend into elbows, elbows graze rib cage. Eventually peeling the heart through cobra or upward facing dog if you tuck onto the toes. And eventually tucking onto the toes and rolling over the toes, downward facing dog. Let's move through one more sun salutation. So from your downward dog, on an inhale, come up onto toes, bend through the knees, and on your exhale, let's take 2 steps to the top of the mat. Eventually finding yourself in a forward fold at the top of your mat. Inhale, hands come to shins, halfway lift and lengthen. Exhale, upper body dives over lower body, forward fold. Inhale, again, gently roll up the spine. One vertebrae stacks on top of another. And eventually hands meet overhead, mountain pose. Exhale, hinge at the hips. Dive over the legs, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift and lengthen. Hands come to shins. Exhale, plant into hands. Plank pose, feet find the back of the mat. Knees lifted or lowered, your choice. Chaturanga, bend through the elbows, elbows graze rib cage. And gently pull through upward facing dog or cobra. And roll over the toes, downward facing dog. Let's move into our sequence of practice for today. And we will start on the right side. So when you're ready, on an inhale, sweep right leg high behind you, 3-legged dog. Exhale, right knee into nose, plant foot between hands. High lunge, upper body rises towards sky, strong bend in your front right knee, and maybe palms meet overhead. Let's move into a warrior 2. Pivot back left foot 45 degrees and cartwheel the hands open to opposite sides of the room. And think about keeping that bend in the front right knee. Gaze comes over right fingertips. High lunge, pivot upper body back towards front of the mat, left toe back towards front of the mat, and hands sweep high overhead, again sinking into that right front bent knee. And moving into our mountain pose. Hands come to heart center. Press off the back left leg to meet at the front. Mountain. On an inhale, we're going to find a tree pose. So I'll start on the left so you can see it well. Let's bring our left leg, option to kickstand at the floor, or bring left leg to the calf. Or if you're looking for a little more, make sure you don't bring foot to knee. So skipping the knee and bring left foot to inseam of right leg. Yogi's choice. Take a deep inhale here. Exhale, let it go. And when you're ready, Drop left leg to meet right, mountain pose. Sweep arms up overhead and dive over the legs. Forward fold at the top of your mat. Your vinyasa, plant your hands, feet find the back of the mat, plank pose. Knees lifted or lowered, chaturanga, bend through the elbows, elbows graze rib cage, and peel through upward facing dog. Roll over the toes, down dog. Let's take the same sequence on the left side. So on your next inhale, left leg sweeps high behind you, three-legged dog. Exhale, left knee into nose, plant left foot between hands, and high lunge. Come up towards sky, upper body reaches towards sky. Keep that bend in the left knee. Maybe palms touch overhead. And open up to your warrior two. Right back leg spins to 45 degrees. Think about keeping the left knee bent. Cartwheel, hands open to opposite sides of the room. Gaze comes over the left fingertips. And try to make sure that your posture isn't too far forward or too far back. Right in the center. Inhale, let's move back to our high lunge. Spin right foot towards front of the room. Think about keeping the bend in the left knee. And bring hands overhead. Maybe palms touch. And moving into our mountain pose. So bringing hands to heart center. And think about kicking off the back right leg, so that right leg meets left at the top of the mat, mountain pose. So from here, again, taking our tree. First option, bring right foot to kickstand on the floor. Knee spins open to right side of the mat. Second option is to bring right foot to left calf. And if you're still looking for a bit more, option to bring right foot to inseam of left leg. Wherever you've landed, take a deep inhale. Exhale, let it go. And eventually releasing right leg back to floor, mountain pose. Inhale, sweep hands overhead, palms maybe touch at the top. Exhale, hinge at the hips. Dive upper body over the legs, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift and lengthen. Hands come to shins. Exhale, your last vinyasa of practice. Plant hands, feet find the back of the mat. Plank pose. Knees lifted or lowered, your choice. Bend through the elbows, chaturanga. Peel the heart through, upward facing dog, and roll over the toes, down dog. So let's slow things down before we move into our Shavasana. I like to end practice where we started, so let's come back into our child's pose, shins on the floor, knees wide or together, and slowly walk the hands out towards the top of your mat. Option to bring hands under your forehead to bring the floor a little bit closer to you. Take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Let it go. And allow your breathing to return to its normal pace. Even inhales and exhales. Noticing how this child's pose feels different from the first child's pose that we took at the beginning of practice. When you're ready, walk hands back towards body. And we'll take some seated stretches before moving into our Shavasana. So first, let's take our bound angle pose, Baddha Konasana. Some people like to call this butterfly pose. So bring soles of the feet together, knees open wide to either sides of the room. And this might be a good stretch, or always option to fold forward with a straight spine. Maybe feeling a stretch in the inner groin. And eventually, if you've leaned forward, coming back to neutral, and everyone extends arms out long. One last burst of heat in the core. Slowly roll down towards the floor, doing your best to maintain the shape that you're holding in the legs. Finding yourself in Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound angle pose. And maybe shimmying on your mat to get a bit more comfortable. And eventually bringing hands to outside of thighs and closing the legs like a book. And we'll take a back bend for practice in bridge pose. So bring heels to graze fingertips. And when you're ready, press into the feet to drive body towards the sky. Think about drawing knees into the midline. And if it's available to you, you can roll the shoulders under the body and find an interlace with the hands. All of these are options. When you're ready, if you have it, release the interlace and slowly lower, one vertebrae at a time, the spine back to the floor. And we'll take one final twist of practice. So bring your hands out to a T or a cactus. And let's gently bring collapse legs to the left side of the room. So option to stay here, or if you're looking for a bit deeper of a twist, you can bring gaze over to the right side of the room. And on your next inhale, bring head back towards center of the body. Bring legs back towards center. And gently bring legs to drop to the right side of the room. This is a stopping point, or option if you want a little bit deeper of a twist to bring gaze to the left side of the room. And on your next inhale, bring knees back into center and gaze back into center. And allow body to take up space on the mat as you move into your Shavasana. So lying down in Shavasana or corpse pose is where we'll end out our practice. I invite you to close down the eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And taking a moment before you move back into your daily life to enjoy the space between your yoga practice and whatever comes next. This is a time where the mind may feel some emotions or may feel a sense of calm, and we can take this time to settle in and try to understand what we're feeling and settle into that and reflect on that. Let's take a deep clearing breath. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And when you're ready, bring some gentle movement into your fingertips and toes. Maybe bringing the movement into your wrists and limbs. Eventually rolling to one side, maybe using an arm as a pillow. And pressing into your other arm, bringing your body up to seated, trying to keep the eyes closed as much as possible. And in our final seat, we can bring hands to lap or hands to heart center, wherever is more comfortable for you. We'll take one last breath together and release the practice. So let's all inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Thank you so much for practicing with me today, and I hope to move together again soon. Namaste.